out of the room. Hang up the phone and make me. Yeah! Kevin! Just give us one minute and thank you. Sorry, thank you.
Diving right back into that world we touched on earlier, it's almost impossible not to feel that familiar spark as we slide deeper into the heart of Home Alone. A story that, on the surface, looks like a goofy Christmas comedy, but underneath it all carries this wild mix of childhood wonder, raw emotion, and edge-of-your-seat tension that somehow never gets old no matter how many times you've seen it. So picture this. It's the holiday season. The McCallister house is buzzing like a beehive ready to explode, suitcases thrown open, kids arguing, parents yelling over the noise, and in the middle of this beautiful chaos stands little Kevin McCallister, the kid who feels like the world just isn't giving him a break. He's misunderstood, brushed off, talked over, basically living that classic younger sibling life. And all he wants is for everyone to hear him for once. But one little fight, one frustrated wish to have his family disappear, and suddenly the universe answers a little too literally. Kevin wakes up the next morning and the house is silent. The kind of silence that hits you in the chest. The family oversleeps, races to the airport like a stampede, And in that frenzy, they forget Kevin completely, absolutely, unbelievably. And here's where everything really kicks into gear. Kevin, realizing he's home alone, goes from terrified kid to full-blown freedom champion in record time, eating junk food for breakfast, sledding downstairs, watching movies he was never allowed to watch, basically living every kid's dream. But the dream doesn't last long, because lurking around the neighborhood are the wet bandits, Harry and Marv, a pair of wannabe criminal masterminds who think they've hit the jackpot with all these empty holiday houses. Only Kevin's house isn't empty, and he's not about to let two thieves ruin the best accidental vacation of his life. What unfolds is this legendary cat-and-mouse showdown where Kevin, using nothing more than his imagination, some household supplies, and a level of bravery no adult ever gave him credit for, transforms his home into a full-scale war zone. Every trap, every prank, every move is one step ahead of the bad guys, and you can't help but cheer for him as he stands up for himself in a way he never thought he could. And while he's putting these booby traps together and preparing for battle, the film sneaks in this softer, warmer thread. The realization that even though family drives you crazy, even though they forget things, argue, and overwhelm you, they're still your anchor. Kevin starts missing them. Not the noise, not the chaos, but the love buried inside it all. His mom, meanwhile, is tearing across the country trying to get back to him, fighting her own guilt and panic, showing just how deep that family bond runs even when everything goes sideways. By the time the final showdown happens and Christmas morning rolls around, you've watched this kid grow, not just in courage, but in heart. Home Alone becomes this powerful mix of comedy, danger, and warmth that wraps itself around you like nostalgia you didn't know you needed. It's not just about a kid defending his house. It's about realizing what home really means, what family really means, and how sometimes you have to lose something just for a minute to understand how much it mattered the whole time. And the magic of Home Alone isn't just in the traps or the laughs or even the chaos. It's in the transformation of a little boy who thought he was invisible, suddenly stepping into the spotlight of his own life and proving to himself and to us that he's far stronger, smarter, and braver than anyone ever expected. Rolling straight from that whirlwind of emotion and chaotic holiday charm, it becomes impossible not to zoom in on the very people who brought all that energy to life. Because Home Alone isn't just a story. It's a crew of characters so iconic that even hearing their names pulls you right back into the McCallister living room. And you know, as we dig deeper into this world we've already stepped into, you start realizing that this movie didn't just happen to become a classic. It became one because every character was carved out with personality, fire, and a little bit of that unmistakable early 90s magic. First off, holding the entire movie on his small but unstoppable shoulders is Kevin McCallister, played by a young Macaulay Culkin, whose performance hits that perfect mix of innocence, mischief, and raw emotion. He doesn't just act. He embodies what it feels like to be a kid who's underestimated until life forces him to take center stage. Then you've got his parents, Peter and Kate, brought to life by John Hurd and Catherine O'Hara. Kate especially becomes this emotional anchor as she barrels through airports, hitches rides with strangers, and refuses to stop until she gets back to her son, carrying that guilt, panic, and fierce determination that only a worried mother can channel. The rest of the McCallister clan, Buzz, Megan, Lenny, Jeff, and the cousins running around, fill the world with that big family chaos that makes the house feel alive. But let's be real. The moment the wet bandits enter the picture, everything shifts gears. Harry Lime, played by Joe Pesci, and Marv Merchants, played by Daniel Stern, are the kind of villains who somehow manage to be threatening and hilarious at the same time. Harry, with that gruff, swaggering confidence, and Marv, with his goofy, almost childlike chaos, create this perfect storm of criminal stupidity that Kevin plays like a violin. And you can't ignore Old Man Marley, portrayed by Robert Blossom, the quiet, mysterious neighbor who becomes so much more than a spooky rumor. His storyline slips into the movie like a whisper, adding this unexpected layer of warmth and humanity that hits you when you least expect it. Add in the airport staff, police officers, and assorted side characters who shape the frantic world around the McCallisters, and suddenly the movie feels more massive, more alive, like every corner is buzzing with personality. All these actors, all these characters, they don't just fill space. They build a rhythm, a heartbeat that drives the movie from the first chaotic family argument to the last tearful reunion on Christmas morning. And when you look back at the whole thing, tying it into everything we've already talked about, you start seeing how each person, each performance connects to Kevin's journey. The kid who went from forgotten to unforgettable, surrounded by a cast that turned a simple holiday mishap into one of the most beloved adventures ever put on screen. What's wild is that once you've stepped into the world of Home Alone, after meeting the characters, feeling the chaos, and watching Kevin rise from overlooked kid to full-blown legend, you start realizing the movie has been quietly weaving these deeper messages under all the jokes, pranks, and iconic one-liners, and suddenly you can't unsee them. It's like the film is winking at you the whole time, saying, yeah, laugh all you want, but there's something real happening here. One of the biggest themes, maybe the beating heart of the whole thing, is the idea of understanding your own strength. Kevin doesn't just survive being left behind, he grows through it. At the start, he's this frustrated kid who feels unheard, invisible in his own family, buried under siblings and cousins who treat him like he's just part of the background noise. But when he wakes up alone, he's forced to discover what he's actually capable of. Running a house, cooking for himself, conquering fears he didn't even know he was brave enough to face. It's that classic message wrapped in holiday lights. Sometimes, life throws you into situations you think you can't handle, only for you to find out you're stronger than you ever imagined. And right alongside that is the movie's exploration of family. Not the picture-perfect, always smiling kind, but the real messy kind where people snap at each other, forget things, get overwhelmed, make mistakes, and still love each other fiercely underneath it all. Home Alone digs into that idea that you don't always appreciate what you have until it's suddenly gone. Kevin spends the beginning wanting everyone to just leave him alone, but once the silence hits, once the house stops feeling fun and starts feeling empty, he realizes that even the chaos had value. Meanwhile, his mom's frantic journey home shows how far a parent will go when their child needs them, making it clear that love isn't always loud or perfect. It's persistent. Then woven through all of that is the theme of facing fear. Kevin's terrified of the basement, terrified of old man Marley, terrified of the dark. But piece by piece, he cracks those fears open. He learns that sometimes the things that scare you aren't monsters. They're just shadows or misunderstandings. Marley's storyline especially hits hard. He looks intimidating, surrounded by rumors, but he ends up embodying one of the film's strongest lessons. Don't judge people based on what you've heard or on what they look like from a distance. Everyone has a story, and sometimes the person you're scared of is the one who needs help just as much as you do. And of course, there's the theme of good versus evil, but done through the innocent lens of a child taking on two grown thieves with nothing but household items and raw creativity. It becomes this playful reminder that cleverness can beat brute force, that courage isn't about being the biggest or strongest. It's about refusing to fold when someone tries to scare you into silence. But maybe the most powerful message of all is the idea of second chances. Kevin gets a second chance with his family, Marley gets a second chance with his son, and even the McCallisters get a second chance to see Kevin for who he really is instead of the troublemaker they brushed aside. By the end, everybody grows, everybody learns, everybody shifts a little closer to who they're supposed to be. And when you step back and let all those themes swirl together, the independence, the family bonds, the courage, the empathy, the forgiveness, you start to feel why Home Alone became more than just a Christmas comedy. It became a story about finding yourself when nobody's looking, realizing the value of the people you love, and understanding that even in the wildest, most unexpected moments, there's something shaping you, pushing you, strengthening you, preparing you for the next chapter. And that's the magic that keeps people watching it year after year, never getting bored, always finding a little piece of themselves in Kevin's journey, rolling forward from those themes that pulse underneath every scene. The evolution of the relationships in Home Alone hits even harder when you realize just how much everyone shifts from the moment the lights go out in that chaotic McCallister house to the final breath of Christmas morning. Because the movie doesn't just throw characters into wild situations, it uses those moments to reshape how they see each other. At the very start, Kevin's relationship with his family is hanging by a thread. He feels brushed aside, drowned out by louder siblings, dismissed by parents who are juggling a million moving parts, and every interaction he has that night feels like one long reminder that he's the smallest voice in the room. Buzz picks on him, the cousins gang up on him, and the adults, overwhelmed and stressed, don't stop long enough to realize Kevin isn't being dramatic. He's craving to be seen. But the moment Kevin wakes up and discovers he's alone, it's like the house becomes this giant mirror, reflecting what he had, what he didn't appreciate, and what he suddenly misses more than he expected. His feelings toward his family shift from frustration to longing, then to genuine understanding. He begins to see that even in the chaos, they loved him. And when he sets up that little Christmas tree and starts talking about wanting his family back, you feel the relationship healing from a distance, one quiet moment at a time. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, his mom's relationship with Kevin goes from distracted to fiercely determined. She instantly regrets every snapped word, every moment she didn't listen, and she becomes this unstoppable force, practically fighting the entire airline system to get home. Her journey becomes its own emotional arc. A mother realizing how easy it is to take time for granted and promising herself she'll never overlook her son like that again. And then there's Kevin and old man Marley, a relationship that starts as pure terror, fueled by neighborhood legends and whispered gossip. But once Kevin grows brave enough to actually talk to him, right there in the glow of that quiet church, it transforms into one of the most heartfelt connections in the movie. Marley shifts from this spooky figure to a man carrying loneliness, regret, and fear that matches Kevin's in an adult-sized way. Their conversation becomes this bridge that helps both of them grow. Kevin gains wisdom beyond his years, and Marley gains the courage to reconnect with his own family, proving that understanding breaks down walls faster than fear ever could. And then, of course, you've got Kevin versus the Wet Bandits, a relationship that evolves from intimidation to confrontation to outright dominance. In the beginning, Kevin is scared of them, unsure what to do when he realizes thieves are after his house. But as he gains confidence, that fear hardens into determination. He goes from hiding to planning, from running to outsmarting, until Harry and Marv become almost symbolic. Obstacles he must face to prove to himself that he's capable, brave, and ready to take control of his own story. By the end, his relationship with them is almost poetic. They see him as a nuisance, but he becomes their downfall. And when the family finally returns home, everything snaps into place emotionally. They don't just hug him because he's safe. They see him differently, as someone who stood strong when the world threw chaos at him. Kevin, in turn, sees them not as the people who ignored him, but as the people he truly loves, even when they drive him crazy. That reunion is the payoff of every emotional thread woven throughout the movie. Kevin and his family reconnecting, not as the overwhelmed, scattered group we met at the beginning, but as people who've learned something about themselves and about each other. So by the time the credits roll, every relationship, Kevin with his family, Kevin with Marley, Kevin with the intruders, has transformed into something richer, deeper, and more meaningful, giving the story its lasting warmth long after the laughter fades. What really pulls you deeper into everything we've already uncovered about Home Alone is the way the film handles character development, especially with Kevin, because the more you watch him move through this wild, unpredictable journey, the more you start to realize you're seeing one of the most natural, believable, and emotionally satisfying transformations ever put into a family movie. And it doesn't hit you all at once. It sneaks up on you, unfolding in these subtle waves that make his growth feel real instead of forced, like you're watching a kid slowly step into his own skin. At the beginning, Kevin feels like every kid who's been pushed aside one too many times, the kind of child who lashes out because he feels unheard, misunderstood, and boxed in. He's not bad. He's overwhelmed. He's got siblings who bulldoze over him, parents who mistake his frustration for immaturity, and a house so loud it practically swallows him whole. But the magic of Kevin's character arc is that the movie doesn't just tell you he's capable. It makes you watch him become capable. The moment he wakes up to an empty house, you see that first flicker of confusion, then excitement, then a burst of freedom that feels almost electric. It starts with little things: microwave dinners, jumping on beds, sledding downstairs. He's tasting independence for the first time. But as the story keeps rolling, that freedom stops feeling like a dream and starts feeling like responsibility. He has to buy groceries, do laundry, manage fear, think through problems, stuff that pushes him from kid mode into something more mature, more grounded. And what makes Kevin so compelling is that he doesn't magically become brave. He chooses bravery over and over in moments where he could have easily backed down. He's scared of the furnace in the basement, scared of the burglars, scared of being alone, scared of old man Marley. Yet each time one of those fears rises up, he pushes through it. Not because he suddenly isn't afraid, but because he realizes he has to be the one to take action. That's the difference between a caricature and a compelling protagonist. Kevin earns every ounce of growth he shows. And then there's his emotional development, which might be the strongest part of his arc. Kevin's journey isn't just about defeating two thieves. It's about realizing what family means. In the beginning, he thinks his family is the source of all his problems. But as the silence stretches on, as the nights grow longer, and the weight of being alone starts to sink in, he begins to understand the love buried inside the chaos. That moment when he looks out the window at families walking together, or when he talks to Marley about reconnecting with loved ones, that's Kevin growing in real time, understanding the value of connection in a way he never grasped before. Even the battle with the wet bandits becomes part of his development. It forces him to step into a protector role, not because someone told him to, but because he understands it's his home, his responsibility, his fight. And something about watching a kid rise to that level hits a part of the viewer that's almost primal. You want him to win, not just because he's cute or funny, but because his courage feels earned and honest. What seals the deal, though, is how the movie handles Kevin once his family returns. He doesn't brag. He doesn't demand rewards. He doesn't throw any "I told you so" tantrums. Instead, he just melts back into the arms of his mother with this quiet, vulnerable relief that shows just how far he's traveled emotionally. You see a kid who went from overlooked to unforgettable, from frustrated to grateful, from dependent to resourceful. And that's what makes him compelling. He's not superhuman. He's not perfect. He's not some unrealistic movie kid. He's a believable child going through an unbelievable situation, and he grows in a way that feels authentic, heartfelt, and genuinely inspiring. By the time the credits roll, you aren't just entertained. You're attached to him. You've watched him discover courage, empathy, responsibility, and forgiveness, and you can't help but feel proud of him, like you just witnessed a moment that mattered. That's why Kevin McCallister stands the test of time. Not because of the traps, not because of the comedy, but because beneath it all is a kid who becomes more than anyone expected, including himself. Keeping the momentum rolling from everything we've already unpacked about Kevin's journey, the story's emotion, and those unforgettable character arcs, you can't help but slide right into the visual world of Home Alone, because the look and feel of this movie is a massive part of why it hits so hard and stays so cemented in people's memories decades later. Almost like every shot was designed to wrap you in that perfect blend of holiday comfort and mischief-fueled adrenaline. The cinematography doesn't just capture scenes, it builds an atmosphere that makes the McCallister house feel like a living, breathing character of its own. This sprawling suburban mansion, glowing with Christmas lights, warm yellows, deep reds, and that classic 90s film grain that instantly sprays nostalgia all over the screen. There's this almost storybook quality to the visuals, where every room looks slightly exaggerated, slightly heightened, almost like the entire movie is shot through the eyes of a kid who sees the world bigger, louder, and more dramatic than adults do. And that's what's genius. The camera follows Kevin's perspective without ever telling you outright. When Kevin's scared of the basement furnace, the cinematography exaggerates its shadows, angles, and movement, making it monstrous. When he's sneaking through the house, the camera dips low, tracking him at kid height, giving you that sense of tiptoeing through forbidden territory. And when he's finally standing his ground, prepping the traps, suddenly the house feels bright, open, conquerable, because his confidence has taken over. The colors play a huge role too. The movie is drenched in those warm, classic Christmas tones, creating this cozy contrast to the slapstick chaos waiting around the corner. The decorations, the lights, the snow, it all forms this perfect holiday canvas that makes the danger feel playful instead of dark. It's like the film is inviting you to laugh, even when the characters are on the edge of disaster. And even though it's not an animated film, there's this cartoon-like rhythm to the way certain moments are shot, especially the scenes with Harry and Marv. The camera lingers just long enough to make their falls, slips, burns, smacks, and disasters feel like live-action Looney Tunes. The cinematography treats the wet bandits almost like physical comedy puppets, using wide shots to emphasize how ridiculous their pain is, quick cuts to punch up the timing, and dramatic framing to turn simple stunts into legendary comedic beats. The house transforms visually depending on the tone of the moment, quiet and shadowy when Kevin's afraid, bright and chaotic when he's defending it, soft and glowing when the themes of family and reconnection come into play. Then outside, the snowy neighborhood feels almost magical. Icy blue nights, warm windows glowing in the distance, streets that feel both peaceful and full of secrets. It gives the whole film this almost timeless energy, a blending of realism and fantasy that's subtle enough not to break the illusion, but strong enough to make everything feel larger than life. And the cinematography during the emotional moments, especially in scenes with Old Man Marley, shifts to this calmer, more intimate style. Soft lighting, still shots, gentle close-ups, pulling the audience straight into the heart of the characters without saying a word. That's what makes the visual style so powerful. It supports every emotional beat, every comedic moment, every piece of tension without ever screaming for attention. It's confident, warm, detailed, and bursting with personality. And when you add all of that together, the kid's eye perspective, the holiday glow, the careful framing, the almost animated energy of the booby trap sequences, you get a visual style that isn't just pleasing to watch, but becomes part of the soul of the movie itself. The thing that makes Home Alone feel like coming home to a story you've known your whole life, even if you're seeing it for the first time. And riding the wave of that visual magic, there's this whole other layer that wraps itself around Home Alone and gives it that unmistakable feeling. The music, the heartbeat of the film, the thing that sneaks into your memory and stays there for life. What's wild is that long before you consciously realize it, the soundtrack is already telling you how to feel, guiding you through every twist of Kevin's journey, lifting the funny moments, deepening the emotional ones, and stitching everything together with this almost fairy tale-like glow. And the moment you find out who composed it, everything clicks into place. Because the movie was blessed with none other than John Williams, the legend behind some of the most iconic scores in film history. His touch is instantly recognizable, but here he does something special. He blends whimsical childhood wonder with emotional depth and Christmas warmth, creating a sound that feels somehow innocent and epic at the same time. From the very first notes of Somewhere in My Memory, there's this spark, this shiver of nostalgia that hits even people who weren't alive when the movie came out. That melody, soft and snow-like, almost floats through the air, capturing the essence of what the story is really about. A kid discovering himself, a family rediscovering each other, and that unmistakable magic of the holiday season. Every time that theme returns, sometimes gentle, sometimes grand, it's like the music is quietly whispering that beneath the chaos and comedy lies something warm and human. But Williams doesn't stop at heartwarming. He brings comedy and suspense to life with these sharp, playful orchestral pushes that practically dance around the screen. When Kevin gears up with his traps, the score shifts gears into this mischievous, almost cartoon-style rhythm that makes you feel like you're part of his master plan. You hear those chimes, those pizzicato strings, those energetic bursts of brass, and immediately you feel the chaos coming, but in a way that makes you excited instead of tense. And when Harry and Marv show up, the soundtrack transforms again, sliding into these dramatic but humorous swings that make their every move feel like the universe is laughing at them. There's this brilliant balance between danger and slapstick, where the music heightens their incompetence just as much as Kevin's boldness, turning the battle for the house into a symphony of chaos. But then you get those quieter moments. The church scene, Kevin talking to Marley, the soft glow of Christmas lights flickering across empty rooms, and Williams switches into something tender, almost sacred. Warm strings, gentle choirs, slow builds that make even the most hardened, cynical adult feel that tug in their chest. Those moments let the movie breathe, grounding it, reminding you that under the laughter is a story about fear, forgiveness, and the longing to be loved and understood. Even the use of classic Christmas songs is woven in perfectly, not thrown in randomly, but integrated with the score in a way that makes the whole film feel drenched in holiday atmosphere. Everything blends: the classics, the orchestral themes, the emotional cues, the comedic punches. It's like the soundtrack becomes the movie's invisible narrator, guiding you from scene to scene without ever taking center stage, yet somehow managing to define the entire identity of Home Alone. And that's what makes the music so unforgettable. It's not just background noise, it's storytelling, it's emotion, It's character. It's the film's soul humming underneath every moment. Without it, Home Alone would still be fun. But with it, the movie transforms into something timeless, something that generations pass down not just for the laughs, but for the feeling it gives them, the feeling that magic is still real, if you know where to look. Rolling straight out of the emotional punch of that unforgettable score, the next piece of the story almost tells itself, because once a film hits audiences with that perfect blend of heart, humor, and holiday magic, the world reacts. And Home Alone didn't just get noticed, it exploded. What's crazy is that when this movie first dropped in 1990, nobody expected it to become the phenomenon it eventually turned into. Critics were split right out of the gate. Some thought it was just a silly kids' comedy filled with slapstick gags and over-the-top chaos, the kind of movie you laugh at but forget about later. But the funny thing is, audiences didn't just shrug it off. They embraced it like it was the warmest, funniest, most comforting thing they'd ever seen. Crowds packed theaters again and again, dragging their families, their neighbors, everyone they knew, until the movie didn't just succeed. It turned into a runaway box office giant that shattered expectations and sat at the top like it owned the holiday season. And the more people watched it, the more they realized there was something special happening. Because underneath the booby traps and the wild stunts and the comedy that made kids scream with laughter, adults found heart, nostalgia, and truth. Families saw a reflection of themselves, the chaos, the misunderstandings, the love they don't always express. And suddenly, this little kids movie became a film everyone wanted to revisit every Christmas, like a tradition you don't skip, no matter how old you get. As the years rolled on, the critical opinion shifted too. What was once dismissed as simple slapstick got re-evaluated as a clever, emotionally rich story that balances comedy and warmth with surprising precision. People started noticing the smart writing, the brilliant performances, the visual style, the soundtrack, and how all these elements work together like clockwork. The same critics who once overlooked it began acknowledging its charm, its tight pacing, its incredible rewatch value, and honestly, its place in pop culture was already cemented by the time they caught up. And that's the key. Home Alone didn't become a cult favorite, it became a full-blown classic. A cult film usually has a small but intensely loyal group of fans. Home Alone, though, its reach went beyond loyal. It became universal. Kids watched it. Adults watched it. Grandparents watched it. Every December, the world dusts off its ornaments, and Home Alone magically pops up right alongside the decorations, like it's part of the holiday itself. Lines from the movie became quotes people still toss around today. Kevin's scream, the wet bandit's disasters, the aftershave moment. They became cultural DNA. The movie didn't just entertain, it became tradition. It became memory. It became the kind of film that passes from generation to generation without losing a single ounce of its spark. And maybe that's the most powerful part of how it was received. It wasn't just liked, it was claimed, embraced, wrapped into the fabric of holiday culture so tightly that imagining Christmas without Home Alone feels like imagining Christmas without lights or music. So yes, it became a classic, but even that word feels too small. It became a ritual, a comfort. A piece of childhood that grows up with you and somehow still feels just as magical every time you hit play. And riding that wave of massive audience love, you can't help but look back and wonder how a movie that hit this hard, that landed so perfectly in the Holiday Hall of Fame, ever came together in the first place. And that's where the whole behind-the-scenes story of Home Alone gets even more addictive, because its creation wasn't just a clean, straightforward production. It was this wild mix of last-minute chaos, lucky timing, creative genius, and a studio battle that almost killed the movie before it even started. What makes it so fascinating is how it all traces back to one simple spark. A writer sitting there thinking about the stress of taking a massive family trip and jokingly imagining what would happen if one kid accidentally got left behind. That tiny everyday thought turned into a script that wasn't just funny. It had heart, it had edge, and it had that kid power fantasy built right into its DNA. And once that script landed in the hands of the director, the same guy who already had a reputation for turning coming-of-age stories into magic, you suddenly had this perfect storm forming. The studio originally backing the movie loved the idea, but the budget kept creeping up, and right when things were heating up, they basically said, "Nah, too expensive," and tried to shut the whole thing down. And here's where it gets legendary. Another studio was watching from the shadows, waiting, ready to swoop in. The moment the first studio pulled the plug, boom! The second one picked it up instantly, almost secretly, like they knew they were rescuing a future classic. It was one of those rare Hollywood heists where the treasure wasn't gold. It was a script about a kid with a BB gun and a house full of booby traps. Once production actually kicked into gear, the uniqueness didn't stop. They didn't shoot in some big Hollywood soundstage. They took an abandoned old high school in Illinois and transformed parts of it into sets, building entire rooms, like the flooded basement, the snowy infrastructure, even the interior of that giant McCallister house. Inside a gym, the house they used for the exterior became instantly recognizable, but the magic inside, that was all handcrafted, built with unreal attention to detail, and every choice, from the director's decision to frame Kevin like a tiny hero in an oversized world, to the way the cinematography played with warm holiday lighting contrasted against the cold fear of being alone, was built with intention. The creation of the booby trap finale alone was like a mini action movie, choreographing every fall, every slip, every scream so precisely that it's practically slapstick ballet. And what's wild is that they didn't know those scenes would become iconic for generations. They were just trying to make something funny and clever, something that felt big but grounded. Add to that the casting, which was a miracle by itself. Landing a child actor who could carry an entire film is rare, but they found someone who wasn't just cute or funny. He had timing, confidence, charisma, and this ability to make you root for him even when he was being a little menace. Pair him with two villains who were equal parts threatening and hilarious, and suddenly you've got a dynamic that feels bigger than the movie's budget, bigger than the script, bigger than anything they predicted. And the secret sauce behind all of it, the thing that gave the film its soul, was the collaboration. The writer building humor around emotion. the director shaping chaos into clarity, the studio giving them just enough freedom to let the team's creativity explode instead of shutting it down. And honestly, that's why the creation of Home Alone is so uniquely satisfying. It wasn't made by accident, but it also wasn't made by playing it safe. It was born from a near shutdown, stitched together with passion and bold choices, carried on the backs of a cast and crew who were all low-key, creating something way bigger than they realized. And the final result? A holiday juggernaut that looks effortless on screen, even though behind the scenes it was a tug of war, a rescue mission, and a miracle rolled into one. What really blows your mind, once you've dug into the wild behind-the-scenes story of how Home Alone was even made, is how all that chaos and near collapse actually feeds right into what became its biggest strengths. Because this movie didn't just stumble into greatness, it punched its way in with a mix of charm, creativity, and a kind of fearless simplicity you just don't see anymore. And that's exactly why it still stands tall against every holiday movie that's tried to copy its formula since. One of its strongest weapons is that perfect blend of humor and heart. It knows how to make you laugh 1 second at some over-the-top slapstick that would probably kill a real human, and then drop you into a quiet moment that hits way deeper than you expect from a family comedy. Kevin's journey isn't just funny, it's emotional, it's relatable, it's that childhood dream of independence crashing into the reality of loneliness. And the film navigates that with this natural rhythm that keeps you glued to the screen without ever feeling forced. And then there's the casting, maybe the film's ace card, because the characters don't just act, they feel alive. Kevin isn't written like a genius or some mini adult. He's a real kid who's clever in that scrappy, improvised, I can figure this out way, and that makes him way more compelling than the polished protagonists you see in similar movies. The Wet Bandits? Total comedic gold. They're ridiculous, but also dangerous enough to keep the stakes real. And their chemistry with Kevin practically creates its own universe of brilliant, chaotic timing. The movie's pacing is another huge strength. It moves fast, but not too fast. It lets every moment breathe just long enough to land before launching into the next one. And you can't ignore the visual personality of the film. The warm, glowing holiday aesthetic contrasted with cold winter exteriors and that greedy little glimmer in the burglar's eyes, all wrapped in a style that makes the whole thing feel like a cozy Christmas card that suddenly goes feral. But even a classic like this isn't bulletproof, and its weaknesses, while not deal breakers, are definitely part of the conversation. Some critics argue the slapstick gets almost too extreme, to the point where the traps are basically cartoon violence brought into the real world. And yeah, if you think too hard about it, those guys should have been in the hospital by the second trap, not sprinting around like damage-proof lunatics. Others point out that the family is written so chaotically in the beginning that they almost feel exaggerated, and the logistics of leaving a kid behind stretch logic to the breaking point if you're looking at it through adult eyes, instead of letting the fantasy take over. But honestly, those weaknesses are also part of its strange charm. The movie knows it's heightened, it knows it's playing by holiday movie rules, and it doesn't pretend otherwise. When you stack Home Alone up against similar films, other kid-centric adventure comedies, other holiday classics, other slapstick movies, it absolutely stands out because it managed to balance all those tones with laser precision. Most movies either go full comedy, full sentiment, or full chaos. Home Alone somehow does all three at once without losing control. And while plenty of later films tried to recreate the kids outsmarting adults formula, almost none of them landed with the same emotional punch because they leaned too hard into the gimmick and forgot the heart. What really seals Home Alone's legacy is that it feels timeless. It doesn't rely on dated humor, it doesn't drown in references, and the core concept, fear, courage, family, standing your ground, hits just as hard today as it did in 1990. It stands out because it feels honest, even in its most ridiculous moments. It falls short only when viewed through a lens it was never trying to satisfy. And in the end, that's exactly why it became a classic instead of a cult favorite. Cult films are loved by specific groups, but Home Alone belongs to everyone. It's chaotic, it's heartfelt, it's flawed in all the right ways, and it's the kind of movie that doesn't just entertain. You grow up with it, you revisit it, you pass it down, and somehow every time it still hits like the first snow of winter. Rolling straight out of everything we've uncovered about why Home Alone still hits so hard decades later, it becomes almost impossible not to dive right into the heart of what the story is actually about. Because beneath all the chaos, the laughter, the traps, and the emotional weight, there's this razor-sharp, crystal-clear plot that grabs you from the opening moment and never lets go. At its core, Home Alone follows 8-year-old Kevin McCallister, this sharp-tongued, underestimated kid who's constantly getting drowned out by the noise of his giant, dysfunctional, holiday-stressed family. After a blow-up with everyone the night before their big Christmas trip to Paris, Kevin makes that fateful wish, the kind all kids have muttered at least once, to have his family just disappear. And when the house snaps awake the next morning in a frenzy of alarms, panic, and airport chaos, that wish seems to come true. Through a perfect storm of distraction, confusion, and everybody assuming somebody else has things under control, the McCallisters rush off to Europe and accidentally leave Kevin behind, completely alone in a massive suburban house that, up until now, he never felt big enough to own. But here's where the movie makes its genius move. Instead of treating this like some horror scenario or trauma story, it flips the whole setup into an adventure. Kevin goes from terrified kid to self-declared man of the house, slowly discovering that freedom isn't just about eating junk food and watching movies he's not supposed to. It's about learning how to face the things that used to scare him, from the creepy basement furnace to the idea of sleeping in an empty house at night. And right when he starts to find his confidence, the real danger kicks in with the arrival of the wet bandits, Harry and Marv, two bumbling burglars who see the McCallister home as the ultimate jackpot and think they've hit the easiest score of their careers. What they don't count on is that the kid they believe is helpless turns out to be the most determined, inventive nightmare of their lives. Kevin transforms his house into a full-scale battleground, rigging trap after trap with this almost cartoonish creativity, and suddenly the movie becomes this wild collision of slapstick destruction and heroic grit, like a childhood fantasy brought to life with real stakes. But the deeper story runs alongside all that madness. The emotional journey of a kid realizing how much his family truly means to him, and a mother who will go through hell and back to make it home by Christmas Eve. The plot isn't just about surviving burglars. It's about confronting loneliness, rediscovering love, and understanding that even when your family drives you insane, they're still the people you can't imagine life without. And by the time Kevin stands in that quiet living room, waiting for them to walk through the door, you feel the weight of everything he's been through. Not just the traps, but the growth, the fear, the bravery, the maturity that snuck up on him when he wasn't looking. That's the magic of Home Alone, a story that sounds simple on paper, but delivers this huge emotional punch wrapped in comedy, chaos, and heart. It's a journey from frustration to freedom to responsibility, a coming-of-age tale disguised as a holiday slapstick masterpiece. And no matter how many times you watch it, the plot still pulls you in because you know you're not just watching a kid left behind. You're watching a kid rise up, take control, and discover who he really is. That's why the storyline isn't just memorable, it's legendary. Rolling right off that deep dive into the plot, the whole thing becomes even more electrifying once you start looking at the faces, those unforgettable characters who carry the story and make Home Alone feel alive in a way almost no other holiday film has ever matched. And seriously, once you step into that world, you can't help but notice how perfectly cast every single role is, like the universe lined up to make this movie hit exactly the way it does. At the heart of it all is Kevin McCallister, played by Macaulay Culkin, whose performance basically stamped itself into pop culture history the second he slapped those aftershave-covered cheeks and screamed into the camera. What makes him so magnetic isn't just that he's cute or funny. It's that Culkin plays Kevin with this fierce little spark. Half smart-mouthed kid who's tired of being underestimated, half scared but determined hero who's forced to grow up way faster than he planned. He carries the whole movie on his shoulders, not by acting like a miniature adult, but by being a real kid thrown into unreal circumstances. Then sliding right into the chaos, we've got the McCallister parents, Kate and Peter, brought to life by Catherine O'Hara and John Hurd. O'Hara especially blasts through the screen with that frantic, guilt-ridden mom energy that's equal parts hilarious and heartbreaking. You feel every second of her desperation as she scrambles across airports, hitches a ride with a polka band, and refuses to give up until she gets home to her son. Peter brings the calmer, steadier presence, the guy trying to keep everyone together while quietly falling apart inside. Kevin's siblings and cousins round out the storm of family noise, Buzz, Megan, Fuller, Lenny, all of them adding their own little flavor to the chaos that leads to Kevin being forgotten in the first place, and each one feeling like someone you absolutely knew growing up. But the movie doesn't take off without its villains, and that's where Harry and Marv step in, played by Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern, a duo so iconic that even people who haven't seen the film know exactly who they are. Pesci brings this gruff, simmering menace disguised under a weirdly charming calmness, and Stern delivers the perfect counterbalance with his lanky, goofy, this can't get any worse energy. Together, they form the Wet Bandits, two burglars who think they're seasoned professionals, but crumble the moment they go up against an 8-year-old with more creativity than they've ever seen. And somehow, even in the middle of all that chaos, the movie makes room for Old Man Marley, played by Roberts Blossom, the mysterious neighbor who goes from urban legend to emotional anchor. His quiet, gentle scenes with Kevin are some of the most powerful moments in the film, giving the story depth and grounding right when it could have easily turned into pure slapstick. Every actor, every face, every line, every presence feeds into this perfect machine where comedy, heart, fear, family, and bravery blend together so seamlessly that you forget you're watching a movie at all. And that's the magic. Home Alone isn't just carried by its story, it's carried by the people who bring that story to life, creating characters so memorable that even decades later, you can picture them instantly, hear their voices, and feel the energy they brought to the screen. And riding the momentum of everything we've already peeled back, the plot, the characters, the way each performance locks into place, you start to realize that Home Alone isn't just a Christmas comedy or a childhood fantasy gone wild. It's a movie loaded with themes that sneak up on you, themes that hit harder the more you think about them, almost like the story's been quietly talking to you the whole time without ever breaking its playful grin. The biggest one, the heartbeat of the whole film, is the idea of family, messy, loud, imperfect, frustrating family, and the painful, unexpected clarity that comes when it's taken away. Kevin starts off wishing his family would disappear because he feels ignored, overlooked, swallowed by the chaos, and then suddenly that wish comes true. And instead of it feeling like freedom, it hits him with this sharp loneliness that he never saw coming. The movie shows that love isn't always soft and pretty. Sometimes it's wrapped in noise, misunderstandings, and holiday stress, but underneath it all, it's the thing you miss the most when it's gone. And woven into that is this whole journey of independence, where Kevin learns the difference between wanting to be on your own and actually having to stand on your own. We watch him stumble through fear, step into responsibility, and slowly realize that being the man of the house isn't just playing grown up. It's laundry, grocery shopping, bravery, and facing things that used to send him running. But the film doesn't stop there. It also dives into redemption and forgiveness through the quiet, powerful storyline of Old Man Marley, a character who's been misunderstood and judged by rumors. Kevin learns in real time that people aren't always who you think they are, that fear can twist the way you see the world, and that reconciliation, especially with the people you love, is worth the pain, worth the risk, worth the humility. It's such a tender message hidden inside what looks like a goofy Christmas movie, but actually cuts deep. Then you've got the theme of courage, not the Hollywood kind with explosions and dramatic speeches, but the simple, human kind. Kevin faces burglars not because he wants to be a hero, but because he's scared and knows nobody else is coming. His courage grows out of necessity, out of love for his home, out of this tiny spark inside him that says, I can do this. And it's the same spark that pushes Kate McCallister to cross half the world, refusing to stop until she gets back to her son. The film basically tells you that bravery doesn't look the same in every person, but it matters just as much. And maybe one of the most powerful messages of all is about seeing people for who they truly are. The Wet Bandits think Kevin is just a helpless kid. The neighborhood kids think Marley is dangerous. Kevin thinks his family doesn't care, everyone's wrong, and the movie uses all those wrong assumptions to tell a story about perspective, how easy it is to misjudge, and how important it is to look deeper. So in the middle of all the chaos, the traps, the snow, the Christmas lights, and the iconic screams, Home Alone becomes this surprisingly layered tale about love, growth, responsibility, courage, and second chances. It wraps its lessons in laughter and slapstick, but the messages stick with you long after the credits roll because they're lessons everybody recognizes from something in their own life, whether they knew it when they first watched it or only realized years later. And building on everything we've already uncovered, the themes of family, courage, and seeing people clearly once life strips away all the noise, you start to notice how Home Alone uses those ideas to shape the relationships between its characters in a way that feels real, emotional, and surprisingly intimate for a movie wrapped in holiday chaos and slapstick mayhem. At the start, Kevin's relationship with his family is basically hanging by a thread. He feels ignored, brushed aside, treated like a nuisance in his own home. The McCallister house is loud, crowded, and overwhelming, and Kevin is the small voice lost in the storm. So when he snaps and says he wishes they'd all disappear, it's not cruelty, it's frustration boiling over. But once he wakes up alone, the whole dynamic shifts. That anger fades into confusion, then into this quiet ache of loneliness, and suddenly he begins to see his family the way you sometimes only do when they're not around, as the people who shape your world even when you don't realize it. At the same time, Kate's frantic journey back home becomes this living proof of a mother's love, fierce, relentless, unstoppable. Every obstacle she hits just makes her more determined, and through that trek, the bond between her and Kevin gets rebuilt long before they even reunite. You feel their connection tightening with every step she takes toward home, almost as if every mile is an apology and every layover is a promise. I'm coming back for you. And when they finally see each other again, it's not a dramatic Hollywood moment with fireworks. It's soft, emotional, and exactly right. A hug that says all the things neither of them knew how to express before. Meanwhile, Kevin and Old Man Marley go through one of the most beautiful relationship arcs in the entire movie. They start as strangers, separated by rumors, fear, and those neighborhood stories kids whisper to each other. Kevin sees Marley as this eerie, dangerous figure, someone to avoid at all costs. But once they talk in the church, all those myths fall apart, replaced by this incredibly human connection between two people who are both dealing with separation, regret, and a desire to fix what's broken. Kevin helps Marley see that it's never too late to mend a relationship, and Marley shows Kevin that fear loses its power once you face it. Their bond is quiet, but it's the emotional backbone of the whole film, and the moment Marley reconciles with his son, and Kevin sees it from his window, is one of those scenes that hits you right in the chest no matter how many times you watch it. Even Kevin's relationship with the Wet Bandits evolves in its own wild way. They start out dismissing him as just some random kid, but as the movie progresses, Kevin earns their respect. not admiration, but recognition. They learn the hard way that he's clever, brave, and far more capable than they ever expected. Their dynamic becomes this comedic cat-and-mouse dance where Kevin is not just avoiding danger, he's reclaiming power in a situation that should have overwhelmed him. And through all of this, Kevin's relationship with himself evolves just as dramatically. He grows from feeling small and unseen to discovering his own strength, resourcefulness, and worth. His whole world shifts from "nobody listens to me" to "I can do this." And the people around him reflect that change back at him by the end, treating him with new respect and understanding. So beneath the humor, the broken ornaments, the feathers, the paint cans, and the chaos, Home Alone is quietly weaving together a story where every relationship, family, neighbor, villain, self, moves from misunderstanding to clarity, from distance to connection, from conflict to something that finally feels like peace. And that evolution is exactly what makes the movie stick with you long after the laughs fade. It's not just funny, it's human. And flowing right from the evolution of those relationships, you start to see how Home Alone pulls off something that feels almost sneaky in how effective it is. The character development, especially Kevin's, doesn't hit you over the head. It unfolds naturally, moment by moment, like you're watching a real kid navigate a real emotional roller coaster, even though the story is wrapped in holiday comedy and full-blown cartoon-level traps. What makes Kevin such a compelling protagonist isn't just his cleverness or his charm. It's the way the movie lets him grow in layers, starting from that fiery little moment where he's fed up with being dismissed and overlooked, all the way to the point where he becomes resourceful, brave, emotionally aware, and connected to the world in a deeper way than he ever was before. When Home Alone begins, Kevin is frustrated, impulsive, and honestly kind of immature, but in the exact way any 8-year-old would be when surrounded by a loud, chaotic family that makes him feel like the smallest one in the room. He wants independence for all the wrong reasons, freedom without responsibility, space without understanding. But when that independence hits him full force the next morning, the movie uses his reactions to show his internal shift, the fear, the excitement, the confusion, the loneliness. You literally watch him recalibrate who he is. One of the biggest strengths of his development is that the film doesn't magically turn him into some unrealistic super kid. Instead, Kevin starts solving problems the way a real kid would. He experiments, he messes up, he gets scared, but he keeps trying. He learns to do laundry, he braves the basement, he figures out groceries, he talks to Marley, something he never would have dared do before. And every step isn't just about survival. It's about building confidence. Kevin's bravery doesn't come from nowhere. It grows from his willingness to face the things he's afraid of, one by one, until by the time the burglars come into the picture, he's not just defending his house, he's defending a sense of home that he's finally learned to value. And this is where his character becomes unforgettable. He's funny in this raw, natural kid way, but he's also shockingly creative, almost like all those moments of being overlooked gave him this sharp imagination that finally gets unleashed when he has to protect himself. His traps are ridiculous, brilliant, reckless, and absolutely something a kid with too much time and too much adrenaline would cook up. And they work because Kevin's character has earned that moment. He's grown into someone capable of standing his ground. Meanwhile, the film deepens his emotional side without ever getting cheesy. His quiet moments, like putting out cookies for Santa or looking out the window at Marley and his granddaughter, reveal a vulnerability beneath the bravado. And his realization that he genuinely misses his family, misses the chaos he used to complain about, cements his growth. He becomes more empathetic, more aware, more understanding. That contrast between the mischievous kid defending his house and the lonely child longing for his family gives him this depth that pulls the audience in and makes him feel real, relatable, and unforgettable. Even the adults around him evolve because of him. His mom learns to slow down and refocus. Marley finds the courage to fix his relationship with his son, and even the burglars, in a twisted way, end up respecting him as an adversary. Home Alone handles character development, not by lecturing or moralizing, but by letting action, emotion, and humor shape its characters in ways that feel genuine. And Kevin, at the center of it all, becomes compelling because he embodies every bit of that journey. Fear turning into bravery, loneliness transforming into appreciation, childishness evolving into responsibility. He's not a perfect hero. He's a growing one. And watching that transformation is one of the reasons this movie still hits as hard as it does every single time. And as Kevin's evolution settles in your mind, the movie pulls you even deeper by wrapping all that character growth inside a visual style that feels so iconic, so instantly recognizable, that even a single frame can drop you right back into the world of Home Alone without a word being spoken. What's wild is how the film uses its cinematography to create this perfect blend of childhood wonder and cinematic precision, almost like it's letting us see the world through Kevin's eyes. Big, magical, a little scary, but always full of possibility. The house itself becomes a character, shot in warm, glowing reds and greens that scream Christmas, but also arranged in a way that makes every hallway, every staircase, every quiet corner feel like a stage waiting for something to happen. The camera never just sits still. It moves with the energy of the moment. Wide, sweeping shots when Kevin feels free, tight, close shots when he feels afraid, and those perfectly framed, symmetrical compositions that make the house look like a cozy fortress before it becomes a battleground. The cinematography leans into over-the-top physical comedy too, using exaggerated angles and sudden zooms to turn the Wet Bandit's pain into visual music, almost like a live-action cartoon where every slip, fall, and scream is dialed up with just enough absurdity to keep it hilarious rather than violent. You can practically feel the camera laughing with you. But then the tone shifts, and the movie knows exactly how to switch gears visually. Those softer, quieter scenes, Kevin looking out the window as snow falls, or the church bathed in warm stained glass light, hit different because the visuals slow down, breathe, and let the moment settle. It's that contrast that gives Home Alone its emotional weight. Even the editing plays into this personality, cutting fast during the trap sequence to pump up the chaos, then lingering longer in moments of loneliness or realization, mirroring Kevin's emotional state without ever calling attention to itself. And while it's not animated, the movie borrows the logic and rhythm of animation Exaggerated expressions, cartoon-like timing, dramatic reaction shots, so the whole thing feels bigger than real life, but never fake. It's grounded and heightened all at once, the perfect middle ground where comedy, storytelling, and visual craftsmanship collide. What makes the style unforgettable is how purposeful everything is. The warm holiday palette, the kinetic camera moves, the comedic framing, the soft emotional lighting, it's all working together to present Kevin's world as both a playground and a proving ground. You don't just watch Home Alone, you feel it because the cinematography makes the comedy funnier, the tension sharper, and the emotional moments softer. And that's why the film sticks with people. Not just because of the story, not just because of Kevin, but because visually it builds a world you want to return to every single December. A world that feels alive, cozy, chaotic, and completely unforgettable. And once you've soaked in that unforgettable visual style, there's this moment where you realize something deeper has been guiding every emotion, every laugh, every little spark of magic, and that's the music. This absolute powerhouse of a soundtrack that doesn't just sit in the background, but practically breathes life into the film. What makes it hit so hard is that it was composed by one of the greatest musical storytellers to ever touch cinema. A guy whose melodies you can recognize in a heartbeat, John Williams. And honestly, the way he approached Home Alone is nothing short of legendary. It's like he looked at this wild mix of slapstick chaos, childhood innocence, and genuine emotional warmth and said, "All right, let's make this feel like Christmas, adventure, comedy, and heartache, all at the same time." His score slips into the film like a living heartbeat, guiding your emotions almost without you realizing it. The main theme, with those soft choral voices and twinkling bells, instantly drops you into that nostalgic, snowy holiday feeling, like stepping into a memory you didn't even know you had. It has this magical storybook quality to it, gentle but full of wonder, perfect for a film that's literally about a kid discovering he's capable of more than anyone thought. And then Williams hits you with "Somewhere in My Memory," which is basically the emotional core of the entire movie. It captures the ache of missing family, the comfort of the holidays, and the quiet bravery of a kid suddenly facing the world alone. The crazy thing is how it keeps looping in different versions, sometimes big and orchestral, sometimes soft and whispering, sometimes carried by a choir, almost like it evolves with Kevin's journey, reminding you that even as he's setting booby traps and outsmarting criminals, he's still just an 8-year-old who wants his family back. But here's where the soundtrack really shows its genius. The comedy beats. Williams switches gears so fast it feels like watching a cartoon unfold in real time. When the wet bandits are creeping around, you get these sneaky, playful little orchestral stings that feel like they're winking at you, telling you, yeah, get ready, something ridiculous is about to go down. And when the traps start firing off, the music doesn't just support the action, it amplifies it. It becomes chaotic, sharp, rhythmic, turning every slip, fall, and disaster into this perfectly choreographed symphony of pain that makes the whole sequence even funnier than it already is. It's a soundtrack that knows exactly when to be delicate, when to be mischievous, when to be huge, and when to melt into the background to let the moment breathe. Williams uses the orchestra almost like a narrator, guiding you through Kevin's world, his fear, his triumph, his loneliness, his joy, with a level of emotional precision that most family films could only dream of. And that's why the music of Home Alone stands out so hard. It doesn't just support the story, it completes it. It wraps the entire film in this warm holiday glow, adds weight to the emotional moments, gives personality to the comedy, and transforms simple scenes into timeless memories. Without that score, the film would still be fun, but with it, it becomes something iconic, something that sticks with you long after the credits roll, something that, the second you hear those bells and choirs, sends you right back to that big house in Chicago where one kid, armed with nothing but courage and creativity, took on the world. And riding on the wave of that unforgettable soundtrack, the story of Home Alone doesn't just stop at being a fun holiday movie. It explodes into this cultural phenomenon that nobody, not even the folks who made it, could have predicted. And the way critics and audiences reacted to it back in 1990 is almost like watching two completely different worlds collide. Because while regular moviegoers were flooding theaters, dragging their friends, their kids, their grandparents, laughing like crazy and turning the film into this unstoppable box office monster, critics were kind of scratching their heads, tossing out mixed takes, some calling it too violent, some saying it was too silly, others thinking it leaned too hard into slapstick. Basically, critics weren't ready to admit how hard this movie slapped. But audiences? Completely different story. People loved it so much that it didn't just become a hit, it became the holiday movie of the decade, the one everybody quoted, rewatched, imitated, and held on to like it was a new Christmas tradition carved in stone. Kids were reenacting Kevin's traps in their living rooms, adults were howling at the wet bandits getting wrecked, and families were returning to the theater again and again because something about this movie just felt good. Warm, chaotic, relatable, hilarious, all at once. It skyrocketed to the top of the box office, becoming one of the highest-grossing comedies ever made at the time, and it didn't slow down for months. And that's where the magic really kicked in. Home Alone didn't become a cult favorite. It jumped straight into full-blown classic status. Cult favorites are usually movies that start slow, find their audience years later, maybe become a hidden gem or underground hit. But Home Alone came out swinging on day one, instantly claiming its spot as a Christmas essential. The kind of movie that, if you don't watch it at least once every December, you feel like you skipped a step in the holiday ritual. What's even wilder is how it kept growing over the years. It aged into this multi-generational ritual. Parents who watched it as kids now showing it to their own kids. People quoting it without even realizing they're quoting it. And entire scenes becoming memes before memes were even a thing. And that's the real legacy of Home Alone. It didn't just entertain, it embedded itself into culture, into tradition, into the very idea of what a holiday movie is supposed to feel like. Audiences basically crowned it a classic from the moment the credits rolled, and over the decades, its reputation only grew stronger, its charm never dimming, its humor never fading, its heart never losing that little spark that makes you sit back, smile, and remember what it felt like to be a kid in a world that was bigger, scarier, and so much more magical. So yeah, critics may have been on the fence at first, but the people decided, and the people were very, very loud. Home Alone wasn't just a hit, it became a legacy, a tradition, a piece of cinematic comfort food that refuses to get old. And rolling straight out of that wave of audience love and skyrocketing success, the whole thing becomes even more mind-blowing when you look behind the curtain and see how Home Alone was actually made, because the production story is almost as wild and entertaining as the movie itself. This wasn't some giant, carefully engineered blockbuster from day one. No, it started off as this simple spark of an idea, basically a small, heartfelt, what if a kid got accidentally left behind? Moment that the writer expanded into something hilarious, chaotic, and unexpectedly emotional. And the moment the script came together, it landed in the hands of a director who knew exactly how to blend comedy with sincerity. What made that collaboration so unique is that the whole team operated like they were building a live-action cartoon mixed with a warm family drama. And somehow, those two energies fused perfectly instead of colliding. The studio situation behind the movie was almost a movie in itself. There were budget problems, last-minute shifts, and even that famous behind-the-scenes scenario where the project nearly collapsed, then got swooped up and saved just in time by a larger studio that instantly recognized its potential and pushed it full steam ahead. And when you look at how the production actually unfolded, you start to see how much passion went into the tiniest decisions. The house wasn't just any house. It was chosen because it looked like the kind of place that could hold both cozy holiday warmth and total chaotic destruction. And the crew even built parts of the interior inside a school gym, just so they had full control over every trap, every fall, every gag that would end up being iconic. The stunts were designed to feel cartoonish, but real enough to make the audience wince, and that very specific balance became the film's secret sauce. What's really crazy is how fast everything came together. Tight schedules, creative improvising, actors leaning into their roles with this perfect mix of heart and exaggeration. And yet, the finished product feels so polished, so perfectly timed, so in sync, that it's almost impossible to believe it wasn't a massive, slow-moving blockbuster machine. It was more like lightning in a bottle. A team that didn't realize they were about to change holiday movies forever, but went all in anyway, building every scene with this mix of sincerity, mischief, and ambition. And that's the thing that makes its creation so unique. It wasn't just made, it was crafted. Like everyone involved poured something personal into it, whether it was comedic timing, cinematic style, or emotional beats. It feels like a studio film with an indie soul, a big-budget comedy powered by the raw energy of a small team that wanted to make something fun, something timeless, something that wouldn't just entertain audiences, but stick with them for decades. And because they took those chances, because they leaned into the absurd while never letting go of the heart, the production became just as legendary as the movie itself, a behind-the-scenes story that mirrors the film's own spirit. Scrappy, daring, unexpected, and unforgettable. And taking a step back from everything, the story, the characters, the music, the cinematography, the wild production story, you start to see why Home Alone is such a fascinating case study in what makes a movie both brilliant and, in some ways, imperfect, because, like any film, it has its strengths and weaknesses, and examining them shows why it stands out so spectacularly compared to other family comedies, while also revealing where it might not land for everyone. First, the strengths are almost too numerous to list, but let's start with the heart of the movie, Kevin McCallister himself, who is such a magnetic, relatable, and perfectly cast protagonist that he carries the entire film on his tiny shoulders. His ingenuity, bravery, humor, and emotional depth make him compelling in a way that feels timeless, and the writing gives him room to grow while still letting him be a kid, which is a rare balance that most similar films can't pull off. The comedy is another huge strength, both physical and situational. The slapstick sequences with the wet bandits are ridiculously over the top, but also perfectly timed, choreographed, and visually inventive, turning what could have been a simple home invasion into a symphony of chaos that is endlessly entertaining. John Williams' music, as we already talked about, elevates every scene, giving the emotional beats weight and the comedic moments punch, while the cinematography makes the McCallister home a living, breathing playground for both comedy and suspense. Then there's the emotional core, the exploration of family, loneliness, courage, and redemption. It's what makes the movie resonate across generations and keeps people coming back year after year. The pacing is tight, the stakes are clear, and every element, from set design to costume, from supporting characters to secondary arcs like Old Man Marley, works together to make a fully realized world. Now, on the flip side, the weaknesses are mostly about the film's extremes. Some critics and viewers have pointed out that the level of violence, even in slapstick form, is intense for a kid's movie, with the wet bandits getting repeatedly hurt in ways that, if you think about them for more than a second, could seem excessive. Certain jokes are a bit dated or rely on 1990s specific cultural quirks, so younger audiences might not connect with all the nuances, and some of the supporting characters, while funny, aren't fully fleshed out beyond their archetypes, which means a few moments feel a little cartoonish, even compared to Kevin's fully realized arc. But here's the thing. Those weaknesses are minor compared to how the film excels. They're more like quirks that actually enhance the charm for some viewers. The exaggerated violence becomes part of the comedy. The dated references become nostalgia, and the archetypal characters let Kevin shine even brighter. Compared to other family or holiday comedies, Home Alone stands out because it perfectly fuses slapstick and heart, gives its protagonist real growth and agency, and creates a world that feels alive, chaotic, and emotionally satisfying all at once. Many films in this genre either tilt too heavily toward sentimentality or lean too far into gag-based humor, but Home Alone balances both in a way that's rare and difficult to achieve. So when you think about it, the film's brilliance isn't just in its laughs or clever traps or holiday setting. It's in the way all those elements coalesce into a story that's funny, heartfelt, inventive, and surprisingly enduring, with weaknesses that are minor ripples in an otherwise perfect storm of family entertainment that continues to captivate audiences over 3 decades later.